Ruth Roberts, your pet's ally. I hope that you are all well and that life is treating you just peachy. Got several great questions today, so I'm going to jump right over to the Facebook group so we can get started. And Karen, apologies for having missed this last time. So that's weird that West Labs won't ship into Pennsylvania, but then again, that's interstate laws work sometimes. So the I used Dr. Roger Clemens' program, and he worked with West Labs actually to develop this. And so, in acetylcysteine, you would definitely want to get. I think this has become more easily available. Um, Last year, the FDA decided that no, really, it's a drug. Um, so it got a little dicey to get it, but hopefully things are a bit better. The other thing you would want to add is if you've gotten the aminocaproic acid already, this one, the Antiox Q and Antiox QCB, I'm not quite sure what those are, but this is what I used to include in my protocol. One is alpha lipoic acid, and I think Dino's probably in the neighborhood of 65 to 70 pounds. Hey, Sam, I'll circle back to this. And if that's the case, then with alpha lipid, you would want to be giving something in the neighborhood of about 5 to 750 milligrams twice a day. In acetylcysteine, I would use at about 600 milligrams per day. CoQ10, I would use at about 600 milligrams per day. Again, the goal with these three are to keep the neurons functioning normally and to feed the CoQ10. The other thing you could try would be adding in some ribose, which is a specific sugar that the mitochondria utilize to function. And you can get this in a powder. It has a sweet taste, so it's very easy to add into the food. I would start with a gram per day, and what I used to take for fibromyalgia was 5 grams 3 times a day. And so I would start with a gram, titrate up to probably 2.5 grams twice a day, and see if that's helpful or not helpful. Give it at least 3 to 4 weeks before you see what's what. The other thing that you will want to add in is omega-3 fatty acids at the cancer dose, so meaning 200 milligrams per kilogram, or about let's see, so if we're saying Dino is about 75, then that's 34 kilos times 200. So that's about 6,800 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids. The other thing I would really suggest doing is doing an omega quant test for him and making sure that he is in the upper range. I think the upper range for dogs is 8%, but I would shoot for 10 or 12%. So it's really fascinating. I was listening to a talk about epigenetic aging, and interestingly enough, so the biggest impact on aging is if you smoke and if you're overweight. And there was a study done on humans that smoked and took omega-3 fatty acids versus humans that smoked and did not take omega-3 fatty acids. And basically, smokers that took high doses of omega-3 fatty acids were able to reverse their aging clocks back to that of non-smokers who did not take omega-3 fatty acids. So I think there's a lot of power there. And because basically this is an aging error, if you will, slash autoimmune disease, I think this would be an excellent thing to add in. The other thing I'm seeing is utility from the Assisi loops, or pulsed electromagnetic frequency. So if you're not using that already, Karin, I would definitely add that in. Let's see if there's any other. Okay, cool. So let's pop back here. May, excellent that you are happy with that test of pork. And you're running out of pork dried treats, you can do a couple of things. You can try mixing in the bison with the pork and see if that's okay or not okay, as long as that's the only change you're making, but you're currently testing out the dental bone. So I would do that and then maybe take the pork and even if you don't dry it out, just cut it into little cubes that you could use for treats. And glad to hear you feel like you're finally getting somewhere. That is awesome. And then Teresa, yes, I would use an 18 gauge by inch and a half needle. And part of what would help is because there's a larger volume or bore to the needle, then the fluid should flow through more rapidly. And with chronic fluid administration, it will slow down to some degree just because there's some sort of small scarring that happens with the fluids. So hope that helps. Susan is asking about Millie and being due for a rabies vaccine. And there's a couple of ways. And, unfortunately, South Carolina did have this lovely bill which did not pass, but they were going to allow rabies titers in lieu of a rabies vaccine. Fortunately, it just didn't fly. The other thing for those of you that are interested is here are states with medical exemptions in lieu of rabies vaccines. And so that means whether you have a titer or you don't have a titer, you can get an exemption. Unfortunately, South Carolina is not one of them. But there you go. So let me come back over here. So here's the question you have to ask yourself is if your veterinarian agrees to do the titer, and actually what you could send her, the rabies compendium from 2016, which actually there may be a new one out this year. And that should be in the files here in the group. There is a section in there that says that any dog that has ever had a rabies vaccine is considered to be up to date, right? And if that dog bites somebody, then they would receive a 10-day at-home quarantine. And at the end of the quarantine, then they could be updated for the rabies vaccine. So I think that may be a more effective conversation tool with your veterinarian than the whole thing about titers, because this thing she can hang her hat on. So try it out. The other thing is that will your veterinarian continue to treat Millie if she does not have the rabies vaccine boosted or not? And that's a huge question. Some veterinarians will, some veterinarians will not. In many cases, if the vet's got her back up about things, then it ain't going to happen. Here's the other thing about they do go down as pets age. And so if it has been more than 4 to 5 years since Millie's had a rabies vaccine, there's a good chance the titer is going to be low. And so in that case, you need to be prepared to what to do next, because then your veterinarian will say that oh, pet's titer is low and it's no longer protected, and she is right. And granted, your Millie's exposure risk is pretty small, but it is there still. So yeah, so at 3 years you may still be okay, but as pets age, we tend to see their titers drop. Now, here's the deal with Pepe. He is 13. We have to have a rabies vaccine to fly back into the U.S. And the last time we took a titer, it was dropping down below what is considered protective. And so I bit the bullet and simply repeated the rabies vaccine and did thuja, and so far so good. So that's kind of how, and it's tough. It's a hard question to answer. So that's how I would go about it. Let's see. And Pam, I see your question on CBD. Let me pop that window back up so we can look at it together. And really, what it is, I think we've talked about this before, as far as alternating. Alternating the essential oils. So yes, I would do that. You could use the Heal product, which has no essential oils. And really, because you're just using it for the CBD portion to control both the seizures, in the morning, and then the overnight waking up reduced, then yes, you can absolutely give Heal twice a day. That's not a problem. So all good there. Hope that makes sense. Let's see. Let me turn this back off. And then, yep, and that's perfect. So yes, you can. So here's the thing. Yes, you could use dry bison on a pork day, but if you're already testing the dental bone, wait till you finish with that test first, so you're not confused. Was it the dental bone or was it giving bison with the pork? Does that make sense? And Susan, so, if you're not giving it to her, you're not giving it to her. But I think you need to investigate what the consequences will be with your vet. And again, she says, okay, I'm not going to see your dog unless you vaccinate her, then that's an answer. So that's what you have to do. You've got to, unfortunately, you're going to have to continue working with your veterinarian. And so it is what it is. But hopefully she'll say, okay, I get it. She really doesn't have that much risk of being exposed. And again, show her the rabies compendium from 16 that says, if a dog or cat has ever had a rabies vaccine, and since hers was 3 years ago, then they are considered update. And I think that will make her more comfortable because she has some legal standing to hang her hat on. Okay, I think that is it for this week. We have a Ipets Ultimate next, and that's and what I'm going to talk about next week is flea product safety. And I spent so far 5 hours researching. Many of the links that are referenced in papers from the EPA are actually no longer there. And more disconcertingly, yes, there's some problems with Seresto collars, but frankly, there's a huge problem with what we are putting into our environment. So that's what I got for you. And Pam, yeah, would the vet feel better with a Titer and the potential can of worms as if the Titer comes back unprotective? Then that gives the veterinarian more fuel for the fire. So I would take the route of using the rabies compendium, because at 4 years, we know that 20% of the titers for rabies drop down. At 5 years, we know that 40 to 50% drop down below protective levels. So that's what I have for you this week. We will see you next week with the Zoom call. We'll talk about flea protection options and also the really horrifying and really kind of depressing results that I found. So that's what I've got for you this week. Until next week, give everybody a big hug and a kiss, and we'll talk soon. Thanks. I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, your pet's ally.